Hello everybody, and this is Dr. Vishal Trivedi from Department of Biosciences and Bioengineering, and today we are going to start the new unit, and that is unit 5, human physiology. In this unit we are going to discuss about digestion and absorptions, breathing and exchange of gases, body fluids and circulation, excretory product and their elimination, locomotion and movement, and all these physiological processes which are actually required to run the human physiology are required to run its life cycle. So, let us get started with the understanding how and what is the minimum requirement of an organism to pursue its life cycle. So, imagine that you have an organism. So, what this organism has to do? This organism has to grow over the course of time. So, it has to grow. Every organism also wants to increase its number during its lifespan, and that it is doing by the process called reproduction. Also, every organism has to sustain its life cycle against different types of incoming threats, and these threats are being developed, and so it has to protect himself from the different types of threats. What are these threats? These threats are either environmental in nature. So, this could be environmental in nature, which means the organism wants to protect themselves against the shortage of food, organism wants to protect against change in environment such as change in temperature, change in humidity, and also organism wants to protect against any other kind of environmental changes. In addition, every organism has to protect themselves against the attack from the other organisms. So, it also has to protect himself from the other organism. Now, for growth related issues, the organism has to grow by in two ways. One, it has to grow in the length, as well as it has to acquire the different developmental phases of the life cycle. For example, when we are born as an infant, but over the course of time we are not only growing in size, but also we are becoming a child, and then we are becoming an adult. So, all these processes, whether the growth or protection or the reproduction, are energy driven process, and all these processes require a large quantity of energy to be used. So, from where this organism will get the energy? The organism will get the energy by taking the nutrition from the environment. So, this means if an organism has to pursue its life cycle and it wants to at least do the minimum processes, this means it has to grow, it has to protect, or it has to reproduce, it has to get the nutrition from the environment. So, let us see how the different organisms actually acquire the nutrition from the organism, from the environment or from the system. What are the different types of organisms you can think of? There are different types of organisms. The most simpler one is plant. You can have the animal, you can have the fungi, you can have the algae, and you can have the bacteria. Now, let us see how the plants are getting the energy. So, plants are actually utilizing the energy from the sun, and they are using this energy to assimilate the carbon dioxide and water to produce the simple food or glucose. Animals, on the other hand, do not have the ability to acquire the energy directly from the sun. So, they actually either take up the energy from the plant or they take up the energy from the other organisms. These other organisms could be the mammals or could be other types of different classes of animals. Fungi also have these two modes of acquiring the nutrition. One, they can easily take up the nutrition from the plant or they can take up the nutrition from the other organisms. Simply, on the other hand, algae actually can take up the nutrition from the sun and exactly do the same as we discussed for the plant, that they can actually convert the carbon dioxide and water to form the food, or algae can also take up the nutrition from the other organisms. Bacteria also falls under these two categories, where they take up the energy from the sun and produce their own food, or they can take up the food from the other animals. So, if you see these 5 classes of organisms, what you can see very clearly that there are actually 2 different categories of organisms in this system. One class of organisms which are actually making their own food, and other class of organisms which are not making their own food from by taking the energy from the sun, but they are depending on the plant to provide the energy. So, this class of organisms are called autotrophs, and as the name suggests, they are actually the organisms which can synthesize their own food with the help of taking the energy from the sun, whereas these organisms are called heterotrophs. So, if I elaborate what is autotrophs and what is heterotrophs. So, autotrophs are the organisms which actually take up the energy directly from the sun and can synthesize their own food, whereas heterotrophs are the organisms which can take up which are not been able to synthesize their own food, but they can take up the food either from the plant or from the other organisms to run their life cycle. Apart from these 2 different classes, we also have third class, and that is called as chemotrophs. These chemotrophs are actually can take up the energy by the breakdowns of the chemical molecules. So, chemotrophs are actually breaking the chemicals and producing the energy, and this energy they are using for their running their life cycle. So, chemotrophs are very exclusive class of organisms, and they are mainly been found in the places where the sunlight cannot go, such as very deep oceans. So, let us take a deeper in details how these 2 classes of these 2 classes of organisms are interacting with each other and sharing the food as well as the energy between them. So, we have two classes of organisms, one is autotrophs and the other ones are heterotrophs. So, as you know that there is only one source of energy on this earth, and what is that source of energy? The source of energy on this earth is sun. So, sun is actually providing energy into the environment, and the plants are acquiring this light energy with the help of a pigment called chlorophyll, which is present in their leaves, and by the help of the chlorophyll they are trapping this energy into the form of and then they are using the carbon dioxide and water from the environment to produce the simple sugar. This is also called as glucose, and this whole process is known as photosynthesis. We are anyway going to discuss about the complete detail how this photosynthesis is happening in the plant in a later lectures. So, this simple sugar then get polymerized or get converted to give you the complex sugar. What is the such example? Such example could be the glycogen or starch. This, apart from this complex sugar, the glucose which is being synthesized in the plant can also get converted into other types of food products, other types of materials, such as they can be get converted into protein, they can be get converted into fat. So, at the end of photosynthesis, plant can have the potential to synthesize the complex sugar such as starch or the fat and as well as the protein. The part of this food is being used by the plant for running its life cycle, but the remaining portion it is storing in the form of food. And you can see that this storage could be done in the leaves, this storage can be done in the stem, and this storage can be done in the root. There are many types of leaves which we consume and that actually provides the energy. There are stems which are actually also have the storage which also stores these food material, and that also we consume for taking up the energy. And there are roots, and then we also have the seeds. So, once a plant have this surplus stored food material, that is the food what an animal can take. So, this is actually what the animal is taking and provide for its energy. So, this food material which is actually a complex sugar or protein or fat. Now, this food, if animal wants to use this food for its nutrition, then it has to be get converted into the simple food, that is glucose in the case of carbohydrate, and then this simple food has to be absorbed and used for producing the energy. So, this is what is called as food cycle or the energy cycle in the environment, where a autotroph such as plant is taking up the energy from the sun, trapping the carbon dioxide and water present in the environment to form the simple glucose. This simple glucose, apart from this simple glucose which is getting converted into the complex sugar such as glycogen and starch. It is also derivatizing these sugar molecules to produce the protein and fat. And that material what he has synthesized with the process of photosynthesis, a part of that food is being used by the plant to for running its life cycle, and the remaining food material is being stored in leaves, stem, root or seeds, and this food material is available for the heterotrophs such as animals to utilize and convert that into the energy. So this is a arbitrary example. Let us take a real life example. But the situation exists where anybody can ask where the energy is stored in a food material. See, we are saying that you can convert the complex sugar into a simple sugar, and that simple sugar is going to provide you the energy. So, where the energy is stored in a complex sugar. Let us imagine that this is the structure of glucose. So, in this glucose molecule, what you see is 3 different types of bonds. One is this bond, that is CH bonds. Then you have this bond, that is, or this bond, which is actually CO bond, and then you have another class of bond, that is this bond, which is O and H bond. Okay. So, this is number 1, this is number 2 and this is number 3. So, in these 3 bonds, all these bonds are associated with their corresponding energy, and you can see in the given table that the bond energy of each of these bonds. Okay. And what happened is, this glucose molecule has to be oxidized to produce carbon dioxide and water in the metabolic pathway, and that means that you are actually breaking these bonds. So, by breaking these bonds, you are actually releasing the energy which is equivalent to this bond. Okay. So, if you break the bond between the carbon and hydrogen, you are actually going to release the energy, and that energy can be used or can be trapped in the form of oxidizing or reducing equivalents. Okay. So, let us see in a real example how we acquire the energy from the food material. You might be consuming different types of food material in your life. Okay. What are these food materials? You might be consuming dal, rice, you are maybe consuming any kind of beverages, you might be consuming any other molecule. Let us take an example that you imagine that you have consumed a very popular food material that is called as pizza. So, imagine that you have consumed pizza. Okay. So, what is there in the pizza? You have a base, okay, and so what you have? You have a base. This base is made up of flour or carbohydrate, then this base also has cheese, and cheese is made up of protein, okay. And then you also have different types of vegetables and toppings on the top of this, and that actually is made up of different types of other food materials such as vitamins. Apart from these 3 materials, you also are baking this pizza into an oven in the presence of oil. So, that oil is also present in the cheese. So, what are the 3 different food material or food components you have when you are consuming a pizza. One is carbohydrate, the other one is cheese or the protein, and the other one is, third one is oil, apart from the minor component of different types of vitamins or other materials. So, what you are supposed to do? You are supposed to convert these complex carbohydrate material into a simplified material. So, what will happen? This carbohydrate is actually made up of polysaccharides. Okay? These polysaccharides has to be get converted into monosaccharides, and these monosaccharides then can be used for energy. One example of monosaccharide is glucose. Similarly, the protein is made up of amino acids. So, protein is a polymer of amino acids. So, once you consume the pizza, the protein is going to get converted into a monomeric constituent, that is amino acids, and that amino acid can be used for as a building block. Similarly, the oil is made up of, oil or the fat is made up of fatty acid. So, it gets converted into oil, and that is get converted into fatty acid, and that fatty acid can be used for producing the energy. But you can see, let's dissect this whole process in terms of how it could be happened in your body, or how you can achieve by this. So, you have a big pizza. What you are supposed to do first? You are supposed to break these pizza into small pieces. These small pieces, which contains actually fat, protein and carbohydrate. Then, so first you have to convert the pizza into small pieces, then small pieces which contains these three material has to be fractionated or has to be separated into three different classes. One is carbohydrate, the other one is the protein, or fat. Then these carbohydrate has to be converted to simple sugar or monosaccharides. This protein has to be converted to amino acids, and the fat has to be converted into fatty acids, and then these three material has to be absorbed into the body, and you will produce the energy. Okay. So, let us see what are the different processes are happening in this whole scheme to achieve the energy from a small piece of pizza. So, what is happening when you are breaking a pizza into small pieces? This is actually a mechanical process. Okay? So, you have to do a mechanical process to convert a pizza into small pieces, and then this small piece contains fat, protein and carbohydrate that has to be fractionated into different classes of molecules. This is a chemical process, and then these chemical molecules, which are actually the polymer or the complex food, has to be converted into the simplified food by the enzymatic action or enzymatic process, and then this simplified sugar has to be converted or has to be converted to be absorbed into the body, and this is a physical process. And then these molecules has to be get converted or converted into the energy, and that is a electrochemical process. This means if you want to acquire the energy from the pizza, you have to need a system which actually will have a mechanical process, a chemical process, an enzymatic process, a physical process, and at the end it should have a electrochemical process to provide you the energy. We normally take up the food, okay. So this means you need a very specialized machinery to process, to do this process, not only to do this process, but also to do this in a very strong coordination between them, okay. So that it is not like that the mechanical process is working, but the chemical process is not working, or the enzymatic process is not working. So all these processes has to be in accordance to each other. So this kind of specialized system is called as alimentary canal or the digestive system of the body. So you can see in the given slide that you have a complete scheme of the digestive system is shown, and I will explain you how these processes are operating in each and every part of the body. So if you see the alimentary canal in the given slide, what you will see that we have 4 major parts. In an alimentary canal, you have a mouth that opens up into a buccal cavity. That buccal cavity then is connected through a small tubing called oesophagus, and then this oesophagus get connected to a tube to a bag like structure called stomach. That stomach is attached to a small intestine, and that small intestine is connected to a large intestine. So let us see what are the different components present in these different parts of the alimentary canal. In the mouth, which is a small opening on the anterior part of the alimentary canal, is open up into the buccal cavity. Within the buccal cavity, you have 3 different components. One is called teeth, the other one is called as the tongue, and on the other hand, the buccal cavity also secretes different types of buccal cavity also secretes saliva, and that saliva actually helps in digestion of food. So as you can see, and then the broken food particles once they are smaller than the size of the oesophagus, they transfer through oesophagus into the stomach. In the stomach, we have the different types of enzyme which are being secreted, and they help in digesting the food. And once this digested food enter into the small intestine, the further digestion take place, and in the small intestine the absorption of food also take place. And every food particle, when you take the pizza, you always also take some amount of liquid along with it. It's also being absorbed into the body, and that absorption take place into the large intestine. And that's why if you see in the structure, what you will see is that the large intestine is required to absorb the large every content of the water which is present into the food particles. So let us see how this process actually helps in digesting a pizza into a energy source. So let us see, you have a pizza, it enters into the mouth, okay, and then from the mouth it enters into the oesophagus. From the oesophagus it enters into the stomach, From the stomach it enters into the small intestine, and from intestine it enters into large intestine, and then large intestine it goes out of the body, whichever is undigested food go out of the body. Okay. So, pizza which you take up through mouth, okay, and mouth has three components. One is the teeth, the other one is the tongue, okay, and mouth also secretes the saliva. The saliva actually contains the digestive enzymes, teeth are just like are doing the mechanical process. So, they are breaking the pizza into small pieces, and once these small pieces are available, the saliva, the digestive enzyme present in the saliva are acting on these small particles and starting the digestion process. Once these particles are small enough that they can pass through a small tubing like esophagus, then they will enter into the stomach. So, stomach is like a bag like structures, and it actually primarily it is actually the primary site where you can also store the food particle for a longer period of time while you are eating any food particles. And on the other hand, stomach actually has these secretory enzymes which secretes the acid and also the digestive enzymes. So, what you can see is the stomach is actually a storage space or storage bag which actually stores the food material for temporarily for some time, and then during that period the stomach actually secretes the acid which actually digest the food or disintegrate the food into the individual components, and on the other hand the digestive enzymes are being secreted from the stomach glands, and they also helps in doing the enzymatic breakdown of the food particles. After this it enters into the small intestine, and in small intestine what you have is the opening of bile ducts, and you also have the opening for the digestive enzymes. So, with the help of the opening of bile ducts, the small intestine receives the bile salt, and that actually helps in digestion of lipids and the other materials, and they also have the different types of digestive enzymes which also digest the food into further into the smaller particles. And in the small intestine itself, the absorption of these digested material from the stomach, from the buccal cavity, and as well as from the small intestine, it start absorbing. So, in the small intestine also we have the mechanism to absorb the food material. Once the absorption of the food material is over, then it has been it goes to the large intestine, and in the large intestine it is mainly required to absorb the water from the food particle or undigested food particles. So, because water is also important for running the life cycle of an individual. So, that water is so body does not want to waste the water from the food which is present in the food, and that is also required for the digestion of the food. So, that water is again retained back to the body, and the remaining content is being stored in and stored in the last part of the large intestine, and that goes out from the body as a undigested food or as a secretory product. Okay, so far we have discussed that alimentary canal is a very specialized organ to perform the various steps or various processes required to digest the food material to small particles. But one of the things which is actually very important is to understand is that what kind of structural and functional adaptation has been taken place into the alimentary canal, so that it is digesting the food material into the digesting the food material, and as well as it is not and it is so efficient that it digests the food material, but at the same time it does not create too much secretory product. Okay. So, in this series of lectures we are going to discuss the 4 different aspects of this particular machinery, which is named as alimentary canal. So, what are the 4 aspects we want to discuss? We want to discuss about, first is the structure or anatomy of different parts of alimentary canal. In this we are going to start from the mouth, and then we will discuss about the buccal cavity. We will discuss, then followed by we will discuss about the oesophagus, followed by stomach, followed by small intestine, and large intestine. Now, the question is why we need to discuss about the anatomy or the structure of these different organs. The anatomy, or by discussing the anatomy or the different part of these structures, we would like to emphasize the point that every specialized machinery needs to do 2 different or multiple different aspects or different processes. One is it has to optimized in such a way that it will process and it will do the things with 100% efficiency. Number 2, the machinery, as you can see that in this machinery we have multiple processes operating at the same time. So, the machinery has to optimized, or machinery has to be acclimatized in such a way that these multiple processes at the same work at the same time, and also none of these processes should interfere with the other process. For example, if the mechanical processes is operating within the mouth and that is happening with the help of teeth and the tongue, that does not mean that it is anyway going to interfere with the enzymatic or the chemical processes operating through the presence of saliva. Same is true for the stomach as well. In the stomach, with the help of different types of membranous fold called as ruggi, the food is going to be degraded further into the smaller particles, but at the same time the stomach is also going to secrete different types of enzymes, different types of chemicals to run the chemical processes as well as enzymatic process. So, with the help by discussing these structures and anatomy, we would like to emphasize the point that the structurally or the anatomically how the different parts of the digestive systems are competent enough to perform the digestion. The second part what we want to study also is the how these processes are occurring in different part of the alimentary canal. The processes what we are talking about is not the mechanical process, chemical process or enzymatic process. The processes what we are talking about is how we are taking the food, and the process through which you take the food is called ingestion. Then the second process, as soon as you do the ingestion, then you have to break the food particle into the smaller pieces, and that is called as mastication. And then the third process comes is the digestion, and the fourth comes as the once the food is digested, then you have to do the absorption, and once you absorb the digested food material, then definitely you are going to produce lot of byproducts, and these byproducts are not good for the human body, so they have to be taken out. Since they have a specialized structure and every specialized structure is performing their part and their work, since this is a machinery which actually doing the digestion process, the machinery also can go bad. So, that also we are also want to discuss. So, we at the end we also want to discuss the diseases which are occurring in the alimentary canal. These diseases could be related to the function of the alimentary canal, or it could be related to the presence of different types of nutrients. So, the diseases could be where you do not have a particular kind of nutrients, or a diseases that where different types of particular digestive organ is not being able to work properly. So, all these we are going to discuss. So, let us continue. What we have discussed is that we have a complex food material, okay, and this food material is required a specialized machinery, and that specialized machinery is known as alimentary canal. Also, what we have also discussed is that different components of the alimentary canal. The different components of the alimentary canals are mouth, followed by buccal cavity, followed by the oesophagus, followed by stomach, followed by small intestine, and followed by large intestine, and large intestine, the terminal or the end portion of the large intestine is known as the anus, through which we actually eject out the undigested or the dead part, undigested or the excretory products. Mouth has different organs for helping into the digestive process, and so mouth actually is nothing but the small opening on the face covered by the two lips. We have one upper lip as well as at the lower lip. On the back side of the lips, and between the teeth and the lip, the portion or the space what we have is also called as vestibule. This vestibule is actually a space which is on the back side of the lips and between the gums, and the vestibule then open into the large cavity known as buccal cavity. Within the buccal cavity, we have teats, we have tongues, and we have also the other salivary glands. So, let us see how the buccal cavity of a human alimentary canal look like. So, in the buccal cavity, which is actually has a roof from the top and the bottom, roof on the top and the bottom. Roof is made up of the palate and the bottom is made up of the tongue, which is sit on the jaw bones, and the as you can see in this buccal cavity, just below the, so you have a upper lip and a lower lip, and then below the upper lip you have a series of different types of teeth. We have incisors, we have canines, we have premolars, we have molars, and then just after the teeth it continued become a palate, and then palate is also be of two type. One is called hard palate and the other one is called soft palate. The hard palate has the different types of ridges, and these called as palatine ridges or palatine ragi. These hard type of palatine ragi are actually being required for controlling or for holding the food during the digestion process or during the mastication process. So, the purpose of these ragis are that they do not allow the food to be slip out of the mouth. On the other hand, the soft palate, which is actually the continuation of the hard palate, is required for swallowing the food. So, once the food is masticated, it interacts with the soft palate, and that soft palate helps in ingestion of the food. So, it becomes very slippery, and at the end of that, and because of that, the food gets swallowed into the esophagus. The later extension of the soft palate is hanging in the buccal cavity, and that is called uvula. Uvula has a distinct role into the pharyngeal cavity, and that anyway we are going to discuss in the later time. Buccal cavity opens into a pharyngeal cavity or the oropharynx. On the platform of the buccal cavity, we have we have a tongue, and that tongue is a mobile organ present in the buccal cavity, and tongue has a function to work as a sensory mechanism or sensory organs to provide the sense of the taste. So, let us see how the structure of a tongue look like. So, a structure of a tongue. So, tongue is as I said, tongue is a sensory organ. It is a muscular organ, and it is attached on the back side, attached to the jaw bone or the tongue. It is attached to the tongue bone on the back side, as well as it is connected to the different part of the buccal cavity through different types of muscles. And tongue has very distinct two component. On the back side of the tongue is wider as well as the front portion is thinner, or the thin portion, the front portion is like a tip, and the back portion is attached to the tongue bone and it is immovable, whereas the front portion is small or the movable portion. So, tongue has a series of a V-shaped furrow, which is known as sulcus terminalis, and this V-shaped furrow actually divides the tongue into two parts. One part is called pharyngeal part, which is actually towards the pharynx, and the other part is called the oral part, and that is towards the oral cavity. The vertex of the sulcus terminalis has a small pit like structure, and that is called as foramen cecum, and that foramen and on the other hand, on the top portion of the towards the pharyngeal side, they have a series of small cavities, and these cavities are known as lingual tonsils. These lingual tonsils are the receptory of T and B lymphocytes, and As you know that when we are taking a food, we are also taking the different types of infectious organisms. So, sometimes the food may be not very hygienic. So, it may contain different types of infectious organisms, and as a result these tonsils actually the B cells or T cell present in these tonsils actually respond to that infectious organisms, and then they respond. Apart from and then the tongue has actually 4 different types of papillaes which are present on the oral part of the tongue. These are folate papillaes, fungiform papillaes, filiform papillae and valate papillaes. So, what are these papillaes? Papillaes are actually a cone shape or the depression on the tongue, and they are having a open surface on the top. So, purpose of most of these papillaes are that they provide the sense of taste, and except the filiform papillaes, rest all other type of papillaes have a taste buds to provide the taste for different types of food. So, valate papillaes are like a leaf like structures, and they are present on the interface of the oral part as well as the pharyngeal part. The interface at which the oral and pharyngeal part meets, or just below the sulcus terminalis. Then we have a fungiform papillae. Fungiform papillaes are present on the oral part, and they are small in structure, and they are distributed throughout the oral part. Then we have filiform papillaes. The filiform papillaes are small papillaes, and they are keratinized. So, they do not contain the taste buds, and as a result, and their main function is to hold the food while the food is moving onto the tongue, and they actually hold the food and bring it below the teeth while we are doing the mastication. And also these are the papillaes which actually mix the food with saliva to make a bolus as well. And then we have a fungiform papillaes. Fungiform papillaes are slightly larger in size, and they are also distributed onto the oral part. The purpose of these different types of papillaes, as we have discussed already earlier, that they are actually providing the taste for different types of food. So, all these we are going to discuss from now onwards in the subsequent lecture series. Thank you.